All right. Probably continue to have people jumping on, but we do want to respect people's time to get started. First, let me say thanks to everybody for jumping on here to our first webinar for the University Consortium for Health, Food, and Agricultural Resilience. This is a new endeavor that we are excited about. This webinar series, we hope to continue with a once a month webinar, whether it's individuals or panelists, all things related to health, food, and agricultural resilience as it relates to national security endeavors, the future of our health and food and veterinary systems in the U.S. As a reminder, this is probably for a lot of us. I'm an economist by trade. This is going to be a broad group of individuals. So we're going to have all different areas. We may have some computer scientists to engineers to vets to legislators who might be able to join with us participating. So it's going to be some technical expertise, but it's really going to be about big picture items and, things we can do as groups and beyond our subject matter area of expertise that we can get together to work on these. So today's first webinar, we have Ann Hammer and Josh Dice from Sandia National Laboratories. I want to tell you guys, I had the opportunity the last week to sit in on an exercise that these individuals did with the state of Washington and Canada on a feral hog exercise cross-border. How is this managed? Washington doesn't have a feral hog problem, but what happens in a situation when this occurs? The multitude of items that occurs in this is kind of mind-boggling if you never put yourself in that situation, from things like who's responsible for the cleanup and the testing of the hogs, who gets notified, who has jurisdiction on what boundary. So it was a great seminar, lots of great questions. I'm going to steal Josh's thunder just maybe a little bit. I got to participate in. I think one of the things that I found that the communication of how this is communicated throughout the governmental entities with extension programs, with university scientists and labs, a lot of work to be done in that area. And then I think the other big area that, and Josh and Ann can, if they want to talk about it during their talk, they can a little bit, was laboratory testing and speed of laboratory and on-field testing to be able to recognize some of these zoonotic diseases. And obviously it was over hogs, but it could be for anything. If one of these disease outbreaks occurs, how can you quickly do it without leaving animals out in the wild, exposed to other animals that might choose to use those hogs as additional food sources, or, raptors or carrions that might be able to carry the disease elsewhere. So it was a great presentation, a great workshop. I know they had well over 100 people attend that. But this is some work that's probably outside of a lot of our academic areas. For those of you that are academics, on how do you take the research that a lot of you all are doing, apply it, and then what is the response? How can academics help with the research in those areas? How can extension in particular help in the communication of food type disasters, health disasters, ag disasters, and response? So it's a great seminar. I do ask that if you have some questions, feel free to put it in the chat. Raise your hand. We will make the recording available to everyone afterwards, and then when Josh and Ann are done speaking, we will let you know if take yourself off mute to ask questions that you may have. So you did not come to listen to me, but I do want to express my thanks for jumping on. And if you're interested in doing a webinar, we are looking for somebody to lead our one in December. We do have January and March and April of next year taken care of. So without further ado, let me turn this over to Josh and Ann.
Sure, I'm going to share my screen really quickly, so hopefully everybody can everybody see that? And Josh, I cannot see the
I can see
chat.
the screen.
Awesome. Okay, excellent. So, hi everybody. Again, my name is Joshua Dice. I am with Sandia National Laboratories with my colleague and a couple folks on the call. Um, but my colleague here, Ann Hammer, her and I will be facilitating this presentation. I will start with the majority of the upfront content with Ann's support, and then Ann will lead us through kind of maybe a facilitated discussion on opportunities for the university consortium as it relates to some of these exercise and engagement activities, and how we can leverage not only your subject matter expertise, but how in developing these exercises and informing these engagements, in addition to how you can leverage these tools that we are developing. So again, Joshua Dice, Sandia National Laboratories, all this work that we are doing is in support of the Office of Health Security, Health, Food and Agriculture Resilience Directorate. So again, my background is emergency management and natural resources, and have been working on this portfolio at Sandia a little over 2 years now. So I'm thrilled to be here and excited to be chatting with you all. And with that, I will toss it over to Ann to introduce herself.
Hey everybody, glad to be here today. My name is Ann Hammer with Sandia National Laboratories. My background is in microbiology and public health, emergency preparedness, and I guess I can stop there to leave time for a discussion, but I really look forward to the conversation today. Thanks.
Yeah. And again, I will not see the chats as I'm going through this material. So I would like to leave a lot of time at the end for Ann and to have more of that facilitated conversation. But if you have any questions on the material, please put them in the chat, like Josh said. And then of course, if you have any questions on the Pacific Northwest event, I was one of the primary facilitators, and we also have David Hogg on the line out of the University of Oklahoma, who works with us at Sandia very closely on all of the things that we'll be going over today, in addition to as my co-facilitator in Washington State. So with that, I will push forward, try to go to the bottom here. There we go. Okay, so again, I am not a Fed. I'm not a federal employee. Sandia really is a federally funded research and development center, so we really ride that line between Fed and non-Fed, but we are a Department of Energy laboratory. So everything that you see here in these next few slides is very DHS heavy. I just want you all to know that I am not a representative of the federal government in this capacity. So it's really just this upfront material giving you all I guess a glimpse into what the office is for which this supports. So the Office of Health Security, Health, Food and Agriculture Resilience Directorate is tasked within the Department of Homeland Security with carrying out the activities associated with bolstering resilience of the nation's health, food and agriculture infrastructure. So we're interested in the cascading impacts of climate change, emerging and evolving biological pathogens and chemical agents, and their interactions with those systems, both human and animal, technological evolution, artificial intelligence, the cyber infrastructure that really kind of serves as the bedrock of a lot of our production and processing capability within food and agriculture, and then sector specific idiosyncrasies. So we're thinking even cyber and the human health space and maintaining that infrastructure. Interested in all of those threats and hazards and unique risks to really maintaining our lives as we know it. So multifaceted challenges to Homeland Security requires a whole of government approach. This is one very unique thing of this office, I think, is that as a non-regulator, they have the opportunity to not only work with academia in this space, but industry, again, your private producers at every level, private healthcare infrastructure, the entire supply chain, and the entire embodiment of what is that our national capacity in the health, food, and agriculture infrastructure. So these are all the things that we're interested in, that they're interested in, and actively work to advance and bolster the resilience within. So I would say that they do take a One Health approach, bringing again that human health component in with the animal health, recognizing the connectivity there, and then of course the environmental aspects that kind of envelop each of those, and pushes their programming forward. So with that, again, I spoke to a lot of this already, but this is the space for which not only myself and several on the Sandia side work in, but you all work in as well. So we're interested in, you know, human and public health systems and the systems that act in such a way that secures our health security, but in addition to everything that is within food and agriculture, you know, food crops, livestock, equine and poultry, infrastructure. Yep. I'm sorry. Go
Sorry,
ahead.
this is Marcy. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but there is no slides right now.
Oh,
It
that is a
says
bummer.
Joshua is starting to share content, but there's nothing showing.
That's a bummer. So let me.
We'll get that fixed. Sorry about that.
Okay. Is that better? Can we
No.
No. Okay, let me stop sharing. Screen. Sorry about that, everybody. How about that?
Still saying share content. I had your front screen just a second ago. Sorry about this. 1 second, folks.
Yeah, the title slide was there, but from then on there hasn't been anything.
That's so weird.
I wonder if it's something on the Sandia and Josh that we can't share. We might need to send these over to Josh Dietrich to share. I can do that if we need to.
It might be helpful. Are you guys able to see anything?
No.
No. Let me get those sent in case that's what we need to do here. Hold on.
One second, folks. Sorry about that. We'll get this taken care of very quickly.
Right. Sending over to you. Sometimes our systems are really weird about this stuff, so sorry about that.
I'll get it up and going as soon as I get it. But Josh, if you want to continue just talking just a little bit, I'll get this up as soon as I get them.
Sure, yes. The next slide, actually, I would like everybody to see just so we can. It's okay. I think several, if not the majority of the folks on the call have heard this. Through other venues. Yeah, and Josh, if you can just toss them up on your screen whenever you get them.
As soon as I get them. Do you want to talk a little bit about where you just did this? It might be a good intro while we're waiting about the experience over in Washington while we're getting these uploaded.
Yeah, sure. And David Hogg, you're also on the line, it looks like, so please feel free to jump in. So this last, and we will go through this a little bit later on in some of the slides, we developed and facilitated a cross-border exercise between Washington State and British Columbia in Canada, exploring what Josh mentioned a little earlier, feral swine movement across the borders, and what were some of those communication pathways and what response triggers. So, of course, with African swine fever being on everybody's mind, at least if you're involved in animal agriculture, we did not call out African swine fever. However, there was an unknown swine virus. So it started with, the scenario started with some recognition of movement across the border. Some hikers had come upon a dead hog, and just general awareness, and then slowly started to advance into there potentially being some illegal smuggling activities to support local hunting efforts or recreational hunting efforts. And some cascading impacts to there is a illness circulating around a local elementary school, and what would that trigger on the human health side when folks knew that there were rumors around this unknown swine virus making its rounds along the border. So that was our way of incorporating some human health components. Again, this exercise was not focused on the human health. It was really that cross-border communication. So again, I think we had over 140 people registered. I think once I cleaned up the data a little bit, representing about 50 different organizations, we had 5 of the 10 provinces involved in Canada, or 5 of the 10 provinces represented in Canada, about 50 folks in person, another 80 to 90 online. It was a tremendous event. David, did you want to speak to anything? Sorry to put you on the spot. I know you didn't join this one specifically to talk, but if you are able to or want to speak to anything, please feel free to do that. I see the slides are coming up now. Okay, so David doesn't look like.
Can you
Okay.
can you see everything, Josh? You can.
I
go
can.
ahead and-
Yeah.
Okay. You just tell me when to click through.
Awesome. That sounds good. So again, sorry for that interruption, everybody. So as this was the first slide that I was kind of speaking to about the overarching construct of HFAR, the Health, Food, and Agriculture Resilience Directorate. So what are they interested in? What are they tasked with achieving, and what, I guess, methods are they applying? So like I mentioned, they are really taking that One Health approach to some of these problems, or all of these problems, I guess I should say. I know on the Sandia team, we've done a lot of thinking around some of those cascading impacts to climate change. So that includes exploring a historic drought exercise, or developing a historic drought exercise that we beta tested here in the Southwest where I'm located. Emerging and evolving biological pathogens and chemical agents. We have not explored the chemical side of the house. However, we have thought a lot about the biological pathogens, at least within the food system. And then maybe on the chemical side of the house, we have developed a nuclear accident radiological contamination, actually in partnership with somebody on the call, Dr. McDonald out of South Carolina. So that's been a really fun effort, and we hope to beta test that in the fall. So at a very high level, this is what HFAR hopes to do. This is what they were tasked with doing within the Office of Health Security. And again, as a reminder, I do not speak on behalf of HFAR, but wanted to provide everybody on this call and for the recording purposes a little bit of information on why we're all here in support of the folks within that office. So next slide. This is really just an expansion of that last slide. This is all of the any depiction of how the overlapping nature of this space, so that health, food, and agriculture space, almost touches nearly every aspect of our life, whether that be human and public health systems, that overarching health security that we all hope to maintain, but also every facet of our food and agriculture infrastructure, to include food crops, livestock, of course, the infrastructure and supply chains that supports all of that on both the human, plant, and animal side of the house. Of course, wildlife, and exploring that in the Pacific Northwest. That was not only really exciting for us, but I think proved to be a really interesting exercise, and that after action report's being developed now. So I'm confident there will be mechanisms to share that more broadly once it is published. And then, of course, those international systems, infrastructure, supply chains that support all of these efforts in all these different sectors. We're seeing a lot, with the fluctuation prices of fertilizer, and even in the case of this exercise in Pacific Northwest, what would that do along the border if there was a transboundary animal disease outbreak, and how would that impact trade? So these are all things we're interested in, all things we think a lot about, and I know everybody on the call also thinks a lot about these. So again, the Office of Health Security, Health Food and Agriculture Resilience Directorate is tasked with doing just that in hopes of bolstering resilience to the health, food, and agriculture infrastructure. So next slide. Josh, can you go to slide 4?
It should be on slide 4.
Oh, hasn't changed on my end yet. There we go. Okay, sorry, there may be a little bit of lag. This very well could be on my end, so I apologize if that is for everybody else. These are a few of the things that Sandia has done the last several years with the office. So prior to being the Office of Health Security, or within the Office of Health Security, they were under this Counter Weapons of Mass Destruction Directorate as the Food, Agriculture, and Veterinary Defense Program. This was a little slightly before my time in the portfolio here at Sandia, but the team developed a mission needs assessment. So that was really geared towards eliciting subject matter expertise, expert consensus, and drafting a literature review, focus groups, and Anne can speak to a lot of the other activities that went into what eventually became this emission needs assessment, which is the strategic document that not only pushed the program forward, but outlined both near, mid, and long-term objectives, taskings of this is what, based on expert consensus, needs to be done to bolster these systems. Then it was very much focused on food and agriculture and animals. Now we have actually done fairly recently, and it's under review, we've done an addendum to this study looking at trying to round out those edges to incorporate some human health components. So that is no small undertaking. Again, we touch nearly every aspect of our modern lives just by talking about human health infrastructure in addition to food and agriculture infrastructure. So that mission needs assessment was really used to, or is being used as a strategic document to frame what this office will be doing in both that mid, near, and long-term ranges. One of the outcomes of that is this health, food, and agriculture resilience architecture development. Several folks on the call, I think, have already seen that. And the next slide will actually show a larger graphic of that. That we really talk about as being like the slide in a lot of our presentations. It is what I describe as being success, and that's we'll go into it in the next slide, but that's the interconnected network that's needed to truly have a resilient system. So that was a singular representation of that. Stakeholder engagement, I've spoken to a little bit about the Pacific Northwest tabletop exercise, but we also supported a Southwest Borders exercise about a year and a half ago now, I think, or our last year sometime, with our New Mexico partners at New Mexico State University and New Mexico Department of Agriculture. So those were two examples of our international engagements. We partner with several Mexican states and, of course, the entire Southwest region of the U.S. to explore very similar components, that communications pathways, however, applied to a foot and mouth disease outbreak at the Santa Teresa border crossing here in New Mexico, where I'm located. And then on the bottom right, risk assessment, Sandia has a long history of risk assessments. We bring a lot of capabilities and knowledge to the table as it relates to this space. So the next I think on slide 6, we'll be exploring a little bit of that, going from your heavy qualitative type assessment into your much more complex advanced modeling and simulation. So we bring all of those tools to the table to answer these really challenging problems that come our way, and questions that are asked not only by the department, but whoever may be tasking them with answering some of these questions too. So next slide. And Josh, are you able to go into presenter mode just to make the slide slightly larger? If not, that's okay.
Don't think so right now.
If you go
It's
to
opening up on another
yeah.
screen.
Okay, no problem. Okay, so this is that architecture slide that I mentioned in the last slide. So again, how I tend to describe this is what success looks like. As you see, we have several, the components. You have human health, animal health, environmental health, plant health. All those components have a description to them. That was something important that we did in this last mission needs assessment, was support this graphic with slightly more narrative than there was in the original M&A. But as you see in that upper right-hand corner, this architecture is an integrated whole of community and whole of government system of stakeholders and capabilities that ensures that one health security, that health security, not only in the United States, but abroad, as you can see here, with some of the international and international organizations that may be involved, World Organization on Animal Health being one of them. So that network of capabilities and resources, personnel, to strengthen the readiness and resilience of critical health food and agriculture infrastructure against catastrophic, intentional, accidental, and or natural disruption. So again, we're interested in all those things, not just the intentional disruptions that may result in degradation to these systems, but really the whole litany of hazards and risks, to include intentional, but also those naturally occurring incidents as well. So next slide. So as mentioned previously, Sandia has a long history in risk assessment. And this is one of the unique capabilities that I think we bring to the department, is leveraging the different toolkits and disciplines that can be used to inform policy and decision makers on complex national and homeland security challenges. Health, food, and agriculture resilience being among one of the many, right? So we try to leverage everything from that qualitative literature review to very complex modeling and simulation. So again, that technical perspective of it, but knowing that they all have a role in providing insight and supporting decision making and strategy as it relates to this space. So some recent activities we've done, certainly not a comprehensive list, but we're actually performing an analysis now of some of the precedents that have been set in the past as it relates to voluntary private sector resilience programs. So that is something that we are very interested in, is how can we collectively engage with industry more? What are some of those incentives that we can provide to bring industry to the table, recognizing that the majority, if not all, health, food, and agriculture infrastructure is privately owned. They need to be at the table, and they should have a voice and be heard, and need to be a part of the conversation. So that is one of the things we're doing. Another is the developing a qualitative risk assessment and application to evaluate scenarios. So we'll get a little bit more into the scenarios here in the next few slides, but really ground truthing those scenarios, not only in research, and I'll be speaking more specifically to the role of academia there in the next several slides. But what research is being done to inform the scenarios that we're developing and the risk assessments that we're performing. So really just that ground truthing, and an outcome of that here this fiscal year is a health, food, and agriculture resilience risk register. So really just informing and providing that baseline assessment of these are the things we care about and why. The food agriculture supply chain consequence modeling development. Modeling supply chains is not certainly not a novel activity by any means. I know likely several folks on the call and several folks who will be listening to this in the future have likely done some stuff in this space. So something we're really interested in is modeling the consequences of those disruptions. What are some of those cascading impacts that not only impact where the incident's taking, where the incident may be happening, but those regional national impacts as well. And then of course, the next several slides will be going into this HFAR exercise playbook and off-the-shelf packages that we've created, all founded in research and quite a bit of background. So next slide. Okay, so now we will pivot more heavily towards, I think, why we're here, why Ann and I are chatting with you all today. So why, what, and how? Why is HFAR wanting to engage? Why are they wanting to develop these exercises as a means of engagement with these stakeholders? So the mission needs assessment originally, and this was also supported by the findings we saw in our human health study, was these siloed disciplines at all levels of government, lack of capacity and minimal opportunities to train and exercise together against challenging food, agriculture, veterinary, and I'll add human health scenarios to that. So this Pacific Northwest exercise is a great example where we really focused on not only the invasive species component of feral swine, but also that animal health and traditional emergency management component. So I think we heard it not only in this venue, but in others, that was the first time you have your state vet, your public health authorities, and agriculture departments, and in this case, your invasive species council in the same room talking to each other. So that was really fun. What did we develop out of that? Why? Was an exercise playbook and a set of off-the-shelf exercise products and with challenging and novel scenarios that engage all appropriate stakeholders and partners, and examines the cascading effects of all to each of those. So that's what we'll be chatting a little bit more about today. So that playbook is a little bit more of a catalog where you work through it in such a way, and you should have a pretty comprehensive exercise outline after. And those off-the-shelf packages are exactly what they sound like. They are downloadable eventually when they're made public, downloadable resources to with slight modifications that a jurisdiction can pick up, make those modifications, and immediately apply it. So now how do we do this? We're executing several scenario beta tests. I think we've tested about half of them to date. Host materials on open source site. That is a dynamic process. We're trying to figure that out and what makes the most sense. And would love to receive some feedback on that. If you guys think they should be posted a certain place, we'd love to have that conversation. We've presented at several conferences just to know that these resources will be made available. Have received a ton of great feedback there. And then of course, our ongoing exercise development processes with state, local, tribal, territorial partners, and of course, international partners now with the involvement of Canada and Mexico and some of those international engagements. So really all with the overarching goal of creating mechanisms to build capability, recognizing that there are not a lot of resources at that state, local, and tribal territorial levels, just given bandwidth and personnel and funding and things like that. So next slide. Okay, so this is the cover of the HFAR exercise playbook. The objectives of this playbook is to identify optimal mechanisms for communication, assess response capabilities, identify gaps in coordination, identify opportunities for enhanced communication, and intended to be adaptable. So we want these scenarios to be able to be picked up at your local county level jurisdiction, if not in a local community level, up through multi-nations and regional multinational exercises or between states. A lot of the exercises that we've done have been cross border. So I did a Southwest, not only the Southwest border exercise is a great example of that, but the historic drought exercise we developed in support of this program we did along the New Mexico-Arizona border. However, they could also be picked up and applied to a county jurisdiction. So there is enough flexibility and adaptability built into all of these that you can make those slight adjustments to meet the needs of whatever jurisdictions wanting to apply these. So those are the objectives. And again, you see those intended audiences: policymakers, organizational implementers, so senior leadership, and then of course those actual on the ground personnel. Hopefully we have some folks from Extension online. Certainly have you all in mind when developing these. So we'd love to have that conversation. Next slide. So the exercise playbook sectors and scope. We tried to be very thoughtful about these scenarios written in such a way to engage as many people as possible. So you see on this, my left-hand side of the screen, the current TTX scenarios were developed to impact and involve the following components of the food agriculture sector. And we can certainly add those public health components now in some of the scenarios that we'll be talking about on the next few slides, but livestock and poultry, crops, forestry, food manufacturing, distribution, wildlife, supply chain infrastructure, etc. In addition to, I already spoke to this a little bit, but that flexibility and scalability using that HCEP and ICS modeling to be able to be applied at that individual community level up through cross-border and multinational. So there is quite a bit of flexibility. We're really excited about these products and are quite proud about how they turned out. So Josh, could you go to slide 11 actually? Thank you. So this is,
Sorry.
that's fine. So using the playbook, this is a very simplified way there's a more complex flow chart among the first pages in the playbook. This is a simplified version for the sake of this conversation of just how it would work and how somebody who has this document could work through it and have a really strong outline of an exercise upon completion. So you want to, of course, determine your organizational needs, those gaps and opportunities for improvement. You're going to determine the appropriate threat and hazard. So we have earthquake, a plant pathogen, drought, now invasive species. What is most relevant to your jurisdiction? Of course, this is an expanding portfolio, so we will be certainly adding more to that. We have one, again, working with Dr. McDonald in South Carolina, a radiological contamination exercise that we're really quite proud about. And if that is of relevance to your jurisdiction, I know it may not be, but if it is, if you're near a reactor, that could be a very unique opportunity to use one of these packages. So you're going to select the scenario based on those relevant or appropriate threats or hazards. You're going to make any of those needed adjustments, recognizing there's some flexibility to this. It is really hard to create something that is truly off the shelf. So there is some legwork. However, we were very intentional about making that as minimal as possible. So just some adjustments to reflect the jurisdiction for which they're being applied. So you're going to choose and or develop those tailored questions. Through developing these off-the-shelf packages, we have compiled quite a large list of questions to be asked to provoke conversation. Something that I was really excited about in the Pacific Northwest when David Hogg and I were facilitating. We asked one question and the conversation just took off. I think that was a factor of, or a product of the people at the table, which was incredible to watch. But really just these questions that we think need need or should be asked to start having those challenging conversations. So you can pick from those, pick whichever ones align with the organization gaps or needs. You're going to then move to the next section, which is injects. Injects are just, if you have not done exercises in the past, little inserts into a scenario that can create some complexity, introduce some artificiality, or remove some artificiality and make it more real world. Something that I'm really excited about that we have yet to do is we wrote an inject about removing a key player. So what happens when Josh Dietrich is removed from the picture or a response? What would happen? So that's just picking on Josh here a little bit. What would happen if your Secretary of Agriculture is on vacation, God forbid, or your state vet is on his way out for retirement, or whatever it may be? To add complexity, I'm going to remove a key player halfway through a response. Now what? So that's an injector that we're pretty excited about. We have yet to do, but it's an option. And then again, at the end, that red box, once you've gone through this process, you should have a really strong outline for a novel tabletop exercise to explore whatever topic you may be wanting to explore, of course, as it relates to some of the topics that we've developed them for today. So next slide. And these, in talking with Josh and Ann and others, we wanted to highlight what makes the most sense from our vantage point for academia to plug in. So we have a ton of resources on the Sandia side, and now with the creation of the University Consortium, what makes the most logical sense to plug academia into not only the development but the execution of these exercises as well. For us, it is determining what's appropriate, what is the hazard of relevant, what's coming, what are the trends, what's predicted to happen based on modeling or some of that economic analysis, really providing that ground truth for why we're doing what we're doing. So that's that second cell there. And then of course, when applied, or when you use that ground truthing to select a scenario, what are some of those adjustments that need to be made at that local, regional, international level, wherever it's being applied or however it's being applied, that need to be changed or modified or added to or removed to make it that much more realistic. So those are two logical places for us that academia would plug in, and really looking forward to this next fiscal year to exercise that with many of you on the call in our future development. Next slide. So I'm going to fly through these next two so we can allow Ann to have some time. We've created 7 off-the-shelf packages. Those are, again, those literal packages where it has the presentation, your situation manual, your facilitator guide, your exercise evaluation material, everything you need to conduct an exercise with. Those are the 7 off-the-shelf packages, in addition to this exercise catalog, or playbook we're calling it, but it's a catalog of yet those fictional yet realistic scenarios. Illustrating and exploring those novel challenges impacting health, food, and agriculture systems. Use cases, federal, state, local, international partners, architecture development, risk assessment. This is a table that we're pretty excited about, showing all of the scenarios options we have. Again, invasive species is at the bottom, and that we just did that. And then of course the domains, the scope, and the functional pillars being prevention and preparedness up through recovery, each scenario that those hit. So you can kind of go through a tad-lead list of, okay, I want to do this. This is the hazard. What am I going to hit by doing this exercise? So just an easy way to I think, navigate the playbook. And with that, I think we can go to slide 14. Next steps, and I'll punt it over to Ann. So we have 2 additional pilots planned. For those pilots are those beta tests that I've been mentioning, one being the radiological contamination. exercise, partnering with Dr. McDonald in South Carolina and the state of Georgia. Doing it along that border. We're really excited about that one. I think it's going to be really fun and interesting. And in addition to, we developed an exercise exploring a food system contamination outbreak involving a dairy. So something that may be of interest to some of the folks on the line. Certainly happy to have that conversation. We're still looking for a beta test partner there. But those are the two that we have planned for this next fiscal year. And then we're going to develop several more of these packages and scenarios to include one involving flooding, food production and distribution, aquaculture and fisheries. I'll actually be the one leading that one. I'm really excited about that. And then, of course, in wanting to engage our tribal and First Nation partners a little bit more, developing a scenario in such a way that explores some of those cultural implications, some of those cultural components that our tribal partners value, and something that is important to those communities. So we're really looking forward to that one. We're looking forward to developing that one. I think it'll be really impactful. These products will be available soon. We certainly hope. We are actively having conversations on where to put them, but this will be among the communities of the University Consortium where you know before everybody else. So we would love to connect with you if you're interested. And Josh, of course, has our contact information, and we'll be touching base soon. You'll probably see Ann and I's name flying around here in the next few weeks. But that's all I have. And
Great. Thanks, Josh. Great presentation. What we wanted to do with the last 10 or so minutes of today's session is, first of all, offer up the opportunity for you to ask questions. You can either drop them in the chat and we can take a look at them, or feel free to raise your hand or just chime in. So I guess before we get into the focused questions that I have, were there any questions on what Josh has presented so far?
I do see a question from Joanna Davis to how much do you engage with USDA Animal Plant Health Inspection Service and exercise development modeling transboundary diseases? That is an emerging relationship. We are partnering much more closely this next year. Something we're really excited about, where we'll be working with the Veterinary Service National Training and Exercise Program. Hopefully I got that name right. Very close to this next year, specifically on that that production and distribution scenario. To date, all of our, at least as it relates to the Pacific Northwest and that transboundary diseases, that one we really kept at such a level that we wanted to keep it as local as possible for as long as possible. So we removed a lot of the disease verbiage, where we actually stopped the exercise just shy of a positive. Oh, I think hopefully you were able to hear the majority of that. I think I was just muted. So that Pacific Northwest exercise explored some of that. We removed a lot of like the modeling and disease specific verbiage to keep it local. USDA was of course at the table, but that is a relationship that we'll be strengthening this next year as it relates to specifically the production and distribution scenario. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, that said, I can just add to it a little bit. We did have the APHIS Wildlife Services people in attendance at that exercise, which was really helpful just for understanding the resources that might be available, depending on how widespread some sort of incident would be. And I think we've done one-off types of sharing of some of the scenarios developed so far with them to get feedback, or like Josh said, kind of continue to build this relationship of, what exercises do they not have in their repository or might be out of their scope, given that we do a much more One Health type of look. So, but I think, by working closer on that, we can accomplish some of the objectives they have for their planning and exercise scenarios. Let's see. The next question I see is, this general info presented is great to share with the GCC, Food and Ag GCC, where everyone is connected. Have we had any conversations about presenting at one of their meetings, Springer Falls sector meetings? I don't think so. I don't know if DHS has presented anything directly. Josh, do you have any?
I
recollection
don't
of
know,
that?
but I think it's certainly an engagement that's been on our list. I know several team members on our side of the house have attended, including myself, those meetings, and see a ton of value in sharing this information there. We actually gave a very similar presentation, though not in the GCC, with the VSNTEP working group, where we got a ton of great feedback. So thanks for that, Dr. McDonald. It is certainly on our list to do. We'll be working with Kevin and Mark with HFAR to arrange that.
All right, not seeing any other questions in the chat. So the first one we wanted to ask is, based on the scenarios that Josh kind of talked us through or highlighted, what areas of research and development do you feel should be prioritized? Are there particular threats and hazards that require more attention? Thinking through a scenario like this, having people run a scenario like this and recognize their gaps or needs for more analysis in order to strengthen their response. And related to that part, what resources or information do you need to conduct this research? So again, we really try to ground truth, but we also see it from the other side. If a jurisdiction were to exercise one of these, they're probably going to run into things that they just don't have enough information on. So, what kind of research could be done either for exercise development or thinking about an earthquake, thinking about a radiological accident? What work should be done? What resources are needed? So I don't know if it's easiest to raise hands or if people just wanted to unmute and speak up to weigh in on this one.
I think we had just a question there, but I want to jump in on one that I noticed at the meetings. And this is probably much more geared towards the vet and animal science aspect. And I know Josh made the comment, we didn't introduce a positive test for the vet, but it seemed to me that a lot of the comments from the participants in that were, how can we quickly identify diseases in the field to know if an animal has a disease that we should worry about if we find a dead animal. So, thinking about that, a ready to use test that's, doesn't require being shipped off to a lab seems to me, and in the case of animal outbreaks, that might be a phenomenal area of research. But that's an example of kind of one thing I noticed from their presentation and the groups participating in that. And there were veterinarians, there were cooperative extension people, law enforcement, all participating. That seemed to be they didn't get right at that theme, but that was their concern, like time and how do we tell quickly so we can react better.
And I see the suggestion about mitigating mis and disinformation for threats. Yeah, that's a big one. We have some of that woven into a couple of the scenarios. And I think that definitely came up, for example, like what Josh was just mentioning in the Pacific Northwest one. There can be a lot of rumors about the health of the public, rumors about, why these pigs are here. Is it intentional? A lot of things to get in front of. And, I don't think it was super robust yet, but there was some good information shared of, if Canada was dealing with this first, what can we leverage? What worked well in the messaging? What didn't? How can we be consistent? Everybody's kind of got limited amounts of staff available. So I think any of those templates for what to be thinking about in advance of these threats is definitely something that the people don't have a lot of time to put into. So if there are resources, or if that's something that should be worked on in advance to be shared out more proactively, I think that's a really strong topic. It comes up in any emergency, that's for sure.
And I could speak to the Pacific Northwest exercise a little bit. We actually, David, this was something David and I were pretty excited about. We wrote into the scenario that there was social media rumors spreading that Fish and Wildlife intentionally introduced, in this case, Eurasian boars into the area to feed recently reintroduced wolves and bears, or for conservation purposes. So they, of course, had a kick out of that. We got a good laugh in the group, but it was, if that were to happen, did they have plans? We've seen some of our exercises that there is a very formal communication strategy and people at the table whose sole job it is to combat these type of things. It was interesting to kind of see it play out in the Pacific Northwest, but we have had the opportunity to explore some of that through these scenarios.
All right, I know we're getting close on time, so just wanted to pop up a couple of other questions there. Yeah, it's fine if you want to go to that last slide.
Sorry about that.
Thinking about how we can partner better together with the university consortium. So how can DHS work with the university consortium to elicit expertise to improve these scenarios? And I saw one note from David Hogg in the chat that, and this is definitely true, I think really, again, getting this ground truth type of information out to people, such as the economic impact, using modeling, really looking at downstream outcomes, things like that are areas that we've struggled, but there's others like have been mentioned already. You know, what are the best ways for depopulation? What does that realistically look like and mean to go through that process if a scenario were to push us to that? So maybe we can just take a couple of minutes and hear about other ways that you all foresee being able to collaborate on these exercises and make them really robust.
And I just want to jump in. I know we went over that first slide before that, but I think one thing that DHS has DHS has emphasized is how important they feel cooperative extension will be in this, because it's really the first line of information and, you know, planning that a lot of rural communities and definitely the ag communities turn to. So I think that was highlighted multiple times there in that Pacific Northwest, and there's such a big level of trust there with your cooperative extension programs at our land grant colleges. I think we had a question in the chat there.
Yes, related to Eden. We were at the recent Eden conference and did give a presentation, made a lot of great connections after the fact. I think some ongoing working groups or focus groups that various universities are conducting, and also I think interest in reviewing our scenarios, using the scenarios in training opportunities. So HFAR has definitely said, you know, if we have some willing extension partners that we could work more closely with, at least to begin with, to see how these could be used to strengthen training, what scenarios would be useful for your particular area. And I saw Kayla Watts was on the line. We have an upcoming call with the University of Kentucky as one example of these opportunities that we might be able to do something more structured at a training or symposium seminar with. So yeah, I think we could definitely envision or start to think as a group collectively about ways that extension and the Eden network could help us with getting these exercise materials out or building more robust ones in the future.
Mm-hmm.
And Josh and Ann, real quick here, if there's interest from some of these states at wanting to do one of these within their state. You know, for example, if you were in Louisiana, you might want to do one with Louisiana and Texas on wild hogs, right? Similar to what you did in Washington and Canada. Do they have the ability? Can they reach out to you all if there's some interest in doing these types of activities? If they can get enough participation, or at least discuss, hey, we'd like to do this, or, you know, hey, we think an interesting aspect of research that would improve any of these scenarios would be XYZ. Is it, if I give your kind of, when I send the copy of this out, can I send your, and I see you put his email up there, is it okay for them to reach out to you guys and ask about doing those types of activities? I'm sure it is, but I don't want to speak for you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think just to kind of close, I like that we had this first opportunity to meet with everyone, talk with everybody about our work, but I don't foresee this being the last time we talk, either one-offs or perhaps at the upcoming in-person meetings, things like that, more structured conversation around the exercise development and use cases. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I know we're bumping up against the hour here, so I don't want to keep anybody any longer than I booked out time for. But Josh and Ann, thank you very much. I know I was surprised, and again, the level of, and I'll pat Josh on the back here, the level of conversation when you had all of these different individuals who had actually operate in a very similar sphere, but really don't sit down and talk, raises a lot of eye-opening questions and things that we need to do research-wise, communication-wise, development-wise in one of these scenario analysis and tabletop exercises. So thank you all very much for providing this. Sorry for the little snafu early in the presentation, but they jumped right on track and got it done. We'll continue to have these webinars. If anybody else is interested in doing one, please reach out to Marcy and I. We'd love to have it. We'd love for you to share these invites with your friends. We're trying to grow this. We'll be sending out an update asking for, a December one. We're also going to be sending out updates about our upcoming conference in February, which should be very exciting. It's going to be held at Purdue at the Beck campus. Day and a half, so not real long, but it will be very good. We'll have some good speakers, both industry and government, but a lot of it will be after we get some kind of learning points, will be breakout sessions on these areas Josh mentioned. So we'll have a section on aquaculture and or we'll have a section on livestock, including domestic pets and animals, where we'll break out into groups. The first day we'll, kind of brainstorm. We'll have some note takers, kind of let people move. The second day will be much more in depth to try to come up with a research agenda related to this that we'll share with DHS at the federal level, so that they're going to share with their contacts through USDA, National Science Foundation, all of those contacts about what this group thinks are key areas for protecting our food, ag, and veterinary system, and how that all relates to the One Health initiative. So again, thank you guys very much for participating and the questions. I know Josh and Anna provided an email. Please reach out to them if you have additional questions or would like to think about partnering with them. If you need me to do it, I'll be happy to connect you all. But I think this is an exciting opportunity, something that we in the ag sector need to capitalize on, because I think a lot of the attention is not on these items. And I think it's going to be very important in the future. And obviously it's been recognized as a very critical industry. We've seen lots of bills here lately trying to get passed related to the critical nature of the food and ag system. So with that, I want to thank everybody and hope everyone has a wonderful day. Bye.
Excellent. Thank you, everybody.